east, north, south, and west. This is your neighborhood medicine man once again. And I would like to share some information with you guys today. Um, Rule number one, there's a lot of topics going on, obviously, about aliens. You know what I mean? And that's an interesting conversation to have here today. Aliens. What are aliens, who they are, where they come from, and their place in the universal scheme of things? For the most part, we've been given a lot of information throughout the years from alien conspiracy theorists. We've been given a lot of information from the government as of recently. And we've also been given a lot of information through books. One of my favorite think on writing about ancient alien connections and stuff is Zachariah Sitchin. One of my, he's one of my favorite authors on writing about aliens and stuff. Graham Hancock. He also writes a lot of great material, I think, in my personal opinion, about the alien technologies and different things like that. But there's a plethora of books out there about it. So one of the questions, and this comes from a conversation I was having maybe a few months ago. I had this conversation with somebody, and it was really about, are aliens better candidates to be called gods? One of the reasons why, or how that conversation came up, is because on this planet, I think humans, for the most part, we have this acclamation that we're divine beings or whatever. We have this acclamation that we are in the essence of God. It just and there's a variation of beliefs here. Some people believe that they are God. Some people believe that there are variations of God. Some people believe that they are God's children. And I think in all essences, I think everybody is pretty much correct in their own over with you guys today. And trust me, I'm not everybody's cup of tea when it comes to certain specific information. And I'm okay with that. But aliens is an interesting subject because when we look at it, we're looking at let's go to the technology first. When we look at alien technology, what exactly are we looking at? Well, the government, especially the Navy, they say off the coast of Jacksonville, I think it is, off the coast of Jacksonville. And then there were sightings off of the coast of Tampa, Florida. And then there were sightings in other places on the West Coast in California, as well as other areas off the coast of Texas, the Gulf Coast, and so on and so forth. There were sightings. They were seeing these crafts like fly through the sky and dive into the water, make all kinds of different maneuvers, and then shot back into the sky, obviously, and took off. And I guess they're doing interplanetary traveling, which is okay, which is good. Now, my concern is when we, as a civilization here on this planet, we have all of these created concepts about our own divinity. And like I said, some of us say we are gods, and right now, to be honest with you, the concept of humans being a god is definitely being challenged. And it's challenged with information about extraterrestrial activity in our atmosphere on this planet. Let's go look into some of this. What we're looking at is a race of beings, and I don't even know if it's good to call them a race, you know what I mean, because they have their own view and understanding, of course. We're going to say this race of beings, they actually travel back and forth from this planet. They have that technology. And look at our technology. We are still riding skateboards. cars that we're seeing, they could stop midair. They could travel diagonally, horizontally. Really don't know. My question, how exactly can they do this? It seems like their technology defies the laws of our science. And because their technology defies the laws of our science, there is that probability that and its creativeness, or that the technology in which they're using is something foreign to this planet. So when we look at how these spacecrafts or these UFOs, they call it UAPs nowadays, unidentified flying aerial phenomenon. That's what it's called, unidentified aerial phenomenons. These phenomenons are running circles around human technology. And so it throws that question on the Chaldeans, the Mesopotamians, glyphs are recorded. And so one thing we understand about ancient civilizations, I think for the most part, is that they didn't have Kodak cameras. They didn't have cell phones, screenshot and take pictures. They didn't have iPhones, Androids. They didn't have Polaroid cameras and stuff like that. So the ancient idea about taking pictures, they would either draw it or carve it. That is the ancient form of photography. So when they carved and drew pictures, they were actually, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, actually drawing, carving what they were seeing. Now, inside of these sacred temples and on the walls of the pyramids and other sacred places, they envisioned what they saw. Now, some of these statues, especially in ancient Sumeria, I think it was one of the ancient statues of Ishtar, that it appeared that there was a being, maybe 6-7 feet tall. It had on a helmet, and on that helmet was a tubing connected to the back, and there was a shoulder straps, and it appeared to be a backpack on this being. And the helmet kind of puts you in the idea that perhaps this could have been some kind of breathing device, because the Earth's atmosphere is basically conducive to Earth living entities and beings. But let's say hypothetically, if these beings came from another planet where the atmosphere may have been thinner or thicker, it is a probability that they may have had breathing issues when they came here and needed breathing devices to help them breathe. So that would explain why some of the statues were actually carved of these entities with helmets and backpacks, what appears to be like oxygen tanks. So that's interesting. So when we come to the question of who or what are the aliens and our comparison to them, we really got to ask ourselves, like, are we, like, for those of us that say we are gods, like, are we really gods? Really? I think for the most part, if we were to look at extraterrestrial activities, and the government is, I mean, like, let's be honest here, the government is actually disclosing a little bit of the information, not a lot, just a little bit of the information. The UFO conference in the Senate, United Nations also had a UFO conference, because the appearances and sightings of these phenomenons are being seen more and more rapidly around the planet. So my question, back to my question, is if these UFOs and whoever or whatever are in them has that type of technology to travel back and forth, to fly a craft from way out in space and down in the ocean. Because I don't know if you guys saw, the Navy has footage of a craft diving into the ocean doing incredible speeds and then coming out of the ocean, hovering above the water, and then shooting back off. So if these beings have that level of technology, and that's just what their craft, imagine their science, imagine their mathematics, imagine their engineering capabilities, imagine their medical capabilities. Just by observing their technology, you can definitely tell every other science that they have is absolutely superior to human science. So what are we to say now? That's an interesting question. What are we to say now? Are we to say, well, we're superior to them? I think not. I defer from that. Like all of the ancient texts, and if we go back, we actually get into DNA splicing in the ancient days. And it is believed by many scholars and theorists that humanity is we were created genetically through genetic splicing, which means that extraterrestrials somehow altered DNA that were here on this planet and consequently created prehistoric versions of humans that later evolved into who we are now. Now, if we were to believe that notion, let's look at it. Hold up for a second. Yeah. If we were to believe that notion, is it possible that we are at the bottom of the totem pole of living organisms and their development? It is a possibility. It is also a possibility that humans have no right to call themselves gods because the technology that these aliens, these beings actually have is, like I said earlier, obviously superior to us. So where did that really put us? Where does it put us? Now, one interesting thing about what the government, I was reading this book, man. It's a really good book. It was written by William Cooper. It's called Behold the Pale Horse. In that book, it actually, because William was obviously a Naval SEAL intelligent agent, and his story is actually very interesting because when he retired from the Navy, he obviously stole some classified documents and he published those classified documents in his book. The interesting thing is a few weeks after Mr. Cooper had printed the documents into his book, he was mysteriously gunned down by someone in California, and he had an untimely death. And so, the conspiracy theorists, they all began running around ranting and raving about how the government took him out because of the information he was revealing about UFOs, UFO technology, underground bases, and all of these things that we were already speculating. Interesting. In his book, he talked about the craft, the spherical craft, the one with the dome, and it comes out and come back down, that craft. Because there are different various types of crafts. So myself, I did a psychic inquisition into the existence of aliens, which got very interesting. And what I discovered is that aliens speak in tonals, like they grovel. So from my psychic inquisition, I found out that they groggle. They speak in tonals and sounds like animals. And on top of that, aliens communicate by telepathy. So whereas aliens can communicate with humans, but they only can communicate with humans in their mind because we don't know how the tonal thing happens. Like they'll be grunting, and so and we can't interpret that. But when they communicate with us telepathically, and the doctors and the scientists that they spoke with inside the underground base, I think in Mexico, Arizona. And there are people that say that they actually communicated with them, but it was only telepathically. And so it brought out a new understanding about telepathy. Because telepathy, the way we're taught and programmed to believe about it is if I'm communicating with you telepathically, then I'm obviously communicating in English. But what I understood is that the language that the telepathy transfer communications telepathically. And what happens when that communication reaches the person that they're communicating with, the energy is translated into a form of energy in which the person can understand. So this is how it brings even more in-depth information and knowledge. And animals also communicate telepathically as well. So an animal, you can speak to an animal in its mind only when you understand telepathy. So after doing the psychic inquisition, gained a great perspective. So those subliminal messages is actually a low vibration. That telepathic communication with trees and animals is very important in the transference of energy. So when you're communicating, for example, let's do an example here. Example. Let's say you're in the woods, right? And you want to communicate with a tree. Because in my style of root working and telepathic root working, my style of it is that there is no list saying that this root is for this herb is for this is for this. There is no list of that. That's all human created. There's no list that says, oh, alfalfa is for protection. Basil is for protection. This is for there is no list that says that. And a deeper aspect of understanding root work per se in telepathic communication is when you go out into nature, you telepathically communicate with the plants. You telepathically communicate with the trees. You telepathically communicate with the animals. What are you seeking? You're seeking to understand what energy this plant can contribute to your workings. You ask it telepathically. So it reminds me of old times and old days. You remember in the old times and old days when the old people used to just sit there and talk to their plants? I mean, they used to sit there and just talk to them. Hey, good morning. How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And so people used to think that the old folks they're cracking up. They're going crazy. Science turns around and proves that plants do respond to vibration. The scientific evidence. Plants respond to vibration. So when you're speaking good, when you're speaking goodness, greatness, or some type of energy, in a positive light, projecting that to the plant through communication. So when you're projecting that to the plant receives it, absorbs it, and it has a nervous system. It feels it. So once you make the plant feel good, the plant actually grows and gets stronger. You see? So the old folks really wasn't cracking up. They really was on to something by talking to the plants. Same way we speak to our animals. You see? And so when we look at telepathic communication, it can really travel across space and time. A lot of times we don't really understand I think the in-depthness of how important it is in astral traveling. In astral traveling, you're telepathically projecting your consciousness as three frequencies of projection in your consciousness. You can project in the past, you can project here in the future, as well as you can project into the present. Those are the three levels. The past is a low vibrational because it's gone. The energy has already taken place and it went down to the lower frequency realm. You see? And this is why we are taught and we try to teach ourselves to stay away from the past, because the past has an energy that's a low vibrational within it, because it no longer exists in this realm. It exists in other dimensions. And that's a very good topic right there. One day I'll get on to it. But in the present, when you project your energy into the present form, into the present where we're at right now, when you bring that energy out into the present, you can deal with those things that are present and see what's going on presently. You see? So it's just like, if let's say someone is trying to trick you, right? And you project your energy into the present. You can see into their mind telepathically what their motive is. So you have the option to either remove yourself from the situation or play the game. Okay, play the game. So if you decide to play the game, you're going to get a bunch of texts. You're going to play the game. Oh, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, I miss you, I love you, and all this other stuff. But the whole time, you already know the energy. You already know. For real. And so when we telepathically project our consciousness into the future, what are we experiencing there? When you telepathically project your consciousness into the future, what is actually happening is you're seeing events before they unfold. Remember the three frequencies: past, present, and future. Future is the lowest, present is the medium, past is the lowest, present is the medium, future is the highest level of frequency. So it's like tuning into a radio station. Remember those old radio stations in which you had to like tune, like you had to turn the knob, you know what I mean? And you turn this knob to reach that FM station so you can listen to your favorite song. You have to tune it and fine tune it until you get to the right spot with it. Then it actually worked. Remember that? Well, that's how you use telepathy. Telepathy is fine tuning. You just don't go into that realm and say, okay, whatever I see is whatever I see, because you have to determine what level of frequency you're projecting your consciousness into. And that's not an easy cakewalk in the park. It's not easy trying to determine where your frequency is at. So you have to be in tune with your emotions. You have to be in tune with recognizing what is the past energy, what is the present energy, and what is the futuristic energy. Now let's jump ship there. Let's jump the ship. Let's look into alien technology. Aliens communicate telepathically, correct? Okay. And because they do, it makes you wonder, like, what is their science? It makes you wonder, like, what is their spirituality? I'm one of the people that's eager to know it. You know, what is their spiritual systems? What is their belief in God? You see, do they believe they're gods? Or do they believe in a higher life form or life force energy? I think that humanity is a baby in our solar system. I think we're babies. I think we're not in a position to call ourselves gods. I think we're not as powerful as we make it out. I think that psychic ability, developing ESP and psychic ability is the most important thing, because when we look through religions and look at all the prophets, we look at all the magies, we look at all the so-called witches, we looked at, everybody who say they have some kind of power. If you notice, in every path, there is one thing you must know: psychic ability. Possession is a form of what? Psychic ability. Manifestation is a form of what? Psychic ability. Root work is a form of what? Psychic ability. You're psychically channeling your energy through nature to affect a specific change in reality. So when these things are happening, the common denominator in all spiritual paths, the common denominator amongst all prophets, sages, is the ability to use psychic energy. So if we were to script down all of the mythologies, because if you really study mythology, you would understand that mythology is basically children's stories told by the ancients. Each mythological figure, each god, each goddess, each spirit is just a personification of an energy that exists within you. This is why the ancient Kemetic people, Egyptians, taught man know thyself, in which they learned that from the ancient Nubians, the Cushites, the people from Ethiopia, because the first dynasties that were ruled by the ancient Egyptians were by the Ethiopians. And here's an interesting fact. When slavery, and I'm jumping ship once again, when slavery went all through Africa, right? And the slave trade, the industry of the slave trade went through Africa. They invaded every nation, conquered everybody, colonialized everybody, except the Ethiopians. Everybody's knowledge has been distorted, except the ancient Ethiopian knowledge. So being that the ancient Ethiopians' knowledge was never distorted by European conquest. It was never distorted. Why? Because they never could have conquered Ethiopia. So all of their temples that were in the mountains were never reached. So all of the ancient knowledge that obviously the ancient Egyptians inherited through the Nubian kings, all of the ancient knowledge is still in its exact form. So when we look at what is magic today, what is spirituality today, what is religion today, everything is watered down versions. Watered down. All that stuff is watered down. So if you really want to get into the deepest knowledge that was never touched or watered down, that came from the ancient of the ancients, you have to look at Ethiopia. You have to look at what they brought forth, their sacred texts, which means you have to study Ge'ez, which means you have to study Amharic and those languages in order to get a true understanding of what the ancient of the ancients were putting down. Because you have to remember, Egyptian civilization is nothing but a carbon copy of ancient Ethiopia. And all of these Greek, Roman, West African, Northern African, all of those civilizations were carbon copies of Egyptians. You see? And this is why Egypt is the primary source of reference, especially for Europeans. because they did more in building larger structures and monuments. But when we look at their actual knowledge, it was all stolen. All the books were taken out of Egypt and ran into Greece and Rome. And right now they sit in the British Museum. And they have a whole chamber inside the British Museum in which all of these ancient books they're located at, ain't even translated in English yet. They're written in languages primarily that people don't even understand today. And I saw what's interesting as I saw that they're using AI technology to decipher a lot of the ancient text. You see, they use AI technology to decipher a lot of the ancient text. Interesting. Bear with me. And I'm back. Thank you for being patient. So that's unique, man. They're using AI technology to decipher the ancient languages. Interesting, isn't it? Ancient languages are being deciphered by AI technology. But guess what? We don't have access to those books, right? But those are the stolen materials that came out of ancient Kemet. So now, what are we to do? What are we looking at now? We're looking at everything we're dealing with as carbon copies of ancient knowledge. Carbon copies. The original sacred texts are still under lock and key in Ethiopia. Definitely. What we have is what we have. We have some scripts and papyruses that come from ancient Ethiopia that gives us an idea of what the real purest form of ancient knowledge in Africa looks like. That is the reference point. Because honestly, even for the indigenous people here in America, they never wrote. Everybody kind of translated everything from one generation to the other generation through oral tradition. But oral tradition, we live in a digital age now, so oral tradition is not a good thing. Because not only do we live in a digital age, we also live in an age of people that lie, add on, and delusional, and they add things onto the stories. So that level of integrity, I would say, is not in place like how the ancient levels of integrity were. So when ancient priests and masters and sages were passing knowledge down orally, they kept the same pattern, they kept the same energy as they passed down. Did no one added on and took out and created new aspects to the oral knowledge. Now today, oral tradition is like basically called. By the time you read it again, this is what it is. Because everybody's going to add on and take away from the story. This is why oral tradition is done and away with. This is why oral tradition in today's society really can't be but the nature of the humans telling it. Thumb drives, hard drives, and they're storing their information. So now when people create material, you store the information in drives. You store the information in cloud. You're storing information in places where you don't have to worry about no one telling your information. You don't have to worry about no one verbally passing it down. Now, when you look at it, it's being copied and pasted. Take exactly intact the way that original author intended it to be. And this is why oral tradition is out of place in this society as we evolve. We're evolving. So this is why. So Now let's jump ship back. Do aliens have oral traditions? Or do they have sophisticated neural pathways of storing information? That's interesting, isn't it? Now we know that their science is superior. We know that. We also know that in the ancient days there were alien contacts. And I really believe that ancient alien contact was real. Like they actually came down. In ancient India, they spoke about the Dravidians in particular. They spoke about the Vimanas. These were fiery crafts that looked like the spherical crafts we see now. And so the spherical craft we see now is actually in the ancient Indian books in Sanskrit. It's in their books. They drew the craft the way it looked when it came down and the beings that came off of it. You see? And I think for the most part, they taught them a lot of spiritual science, or what became known as spiritual science. I think that for the most part, what became known as spiritual science, they taught them that. But I think the truest, deepest science that they were teaching was telepathy. Telepathy and development of psychic ability. Because when you study religion and you study spirituality, it's all telling you about controlling the mind, how to control the mind. Reality. Because the mind and the brain is instruments of projection of consciousness. Third eye. And so when you look deeper into that, the pineal, the third eye, you also realize that your brain is heavily saturated with magnetites. Do y'all know what magnetites are? Magnetites. What is a magnetite? That's what magnets are made of. So your brain is a magnet, you're attracting. And that's why that was important for the ancient aliens that when they came to the planet to teach the humans. Because if you can attract things, you can attract realities. So they'll technically teach human beings thoughts that are not thought of normally. Ideas normally. All this magnetic material in our mind and our brain. So we can attract and we can repel. So there are certain things you're going to like, then there are things you're going to dislike. It's on your magnetic core. And I think that was the most important science that the ancient aliens, when they came down, if it is used correctly and properly through the same technology they're using, it's just a matter of fact, like 100,000 years advanced than ours. So that was years older. We're absolutely not gods, and we're not even close to it. But what we do have, bear with me one moment, what we do have is the ability to tap into the thought wave data bank. The thought wave data bank, which what cultists call their Akashic records. Everybody Akashic records. What it is, the void dormant. Because there's a movement of consciousness, which we call the waking consciousness, where everything is like moving around. So when you're waking consciousness around, you can grab an idea from here, grab an idea from there. And you can bring those ideas back within yourself. And then you work on materializing those ideas. But in the void is where those ideas, concepts, and energy are dormant. That's where they're at. The higher levels. They're dormant. That is the deepest level of the database consciousness. Where when you go get those ideas and you pull them forward, those ideas are unknown to the masses because the masses are going the pool that's readily available. And this is where the deepest level of development happens. The deepest level of development happens by going inside and activating those dormant energies that's within you. Because even scientists say we don't use the full capacity. I think they say only use 5% of it. And look what I've achieved using 5% of it. So imagining using the full capacity of your consciousness. And this is what I think technology is actually based on capacity. And because they can operate on a daily basis with their brains at its fullest capacity, it places them in a position to be able to add intellectual intelligence. Thousands of times faster than the human brain. So, and you know, science is kind of deep, you know, there's ethical issues about it. And I believe that scientists are creating a microchip that processes that thought for you inside of a headband and then put the answer back into your head, an answer that you were incapable of thinking on your own. So being that we can't access certain levels of content in our brains, artificial intelligence is going to do it for us. I believe artificial intelligence is something that the United States government found when we're actually cried. Scientists obviously reverse engineer it to the best of their ability. So, because honestly, most of those crafts that's flying around, they're being a drone. Most of those crafts we see flying around, the government is seen all around the world doing all these stunts and tricks and moving up and down all around. Those things are not even manned. They're unmanned crafts, but they possess high levels of artificial intelligence. And when they found those crafts, some they shot down, some crashed on their own due to defects or malfunctioning. When they found those crafts, what did they do? They reverse engineered it, and they discovered humans' version of artificial intelligence. And it scares everyone now. The artificial intelligence scares everyone, but it is definitely an alien technology. So when we get to the question, like, I don't believe no human being on this planet has the right to call himself God. God is something way bigger than humans, way bigger than humans. And I don't believe that the planet Earth is the only planet that has life on it. I believe God created humans, God created aliens, God created extraterrestrial beings on many, many, many different planets all across the universe. We're not the only thing here. You see? So wrapping an ultimate reality based on humanity is kind of short-minded thinking. You see? You know, I'm the kind of person to be like, I would love to communicate with an extraterrestrial being, to find out what is their spirituality, how do they view God, what is their religion, what is their social system, what is their economic system, because it's very obvious that it's superior to what we got. We're still learning. You see? Now, with that being said, I'm going to wrap this up very shortly. And I want you guys to understand that Medicine Man is back. And I am actually putting the finishing touches on my new book. I had a book, but it was stolen. So I didn't put that out. But the book that I have now is Transmute That Energy. And that book really is talking about transmuting the energy of your life into something else. Using God force energy, God itself, that God force energy directly, And in that book, we're getting away from the concept of using using whatever and only using God. Because people are used, of course. People use one another for various reasons. Well, if you're gonna let anybody use you, let God use you. Because that is the author of manifestation. That energy is the most powerful energy in the world. You don't need an intermediary between you and God. You don't need it. You don't need a preacher. You don't need a mentor. You don't need a teacher. You don't need none of those things. All you need is a direct access. And direct access and power and majesty of God is something that is hidden deep within you. Peace. This is Medicine Man. I'm out.